Buzzlings, and welcome back to the Tea with B podcast. I am your host, B, and on today's episode, we are tackling the topic of 3D printing. Now, 3D printing is not a new technology. It has been around for quite a long time, but not much has been heard about it in the last couple of years. So my amazing guest, who is a CEO at a 3D printing company, is going to give us a breakdown of what is happening in the industry and what the future may hold, specifically for the consumers who will be consuming these 3D printed products. Is it realistic for consumers to have a 3D printer in their house, as well as some of the environmental issues that 3D printing solves? The guest is also going to get into the good and the bad and the ugly of being a CEO at a company. So without further ado, here's the episode. And on today's show, I'm very excited to have Gabe Bentz with me. Welcome, Gabe.
Morning, B. Thanks for having me on.
I'm very excited. Now, me and Gabe go way back, but the reason that he's on the show today is to talk about the world of 3D. Now, it has been around for quite a while, but Gabe is gonna give us all the details on what's going on because he is also the CEO of a 3D company. It's called Slant 3D. But before I talk over you, Gabe, tell us a little bit about yourself. Now, you're from Oregon, aspired to be a journalist at one point in your life. Now you're in the world of 3D. How did you get there?
Never really aspired to be a journalist. I aspired to be a writer at one point or so.
Yes, I mean, that's probably would have been better, right? Yes.
But no, yeah, I came off of a cattle ranch in kind of the rural part of Eastern Oregon or so. And then coming up from that, I turned into an engineer and ended up studying aerospace and robotics engineering for a few years there. And then I fooled them and I got out and I started working with consumer robots and that kind of thing and toys and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But then through that company where we were doing that product design work, we created a series of products that had to be 3D printed. Mm-hmm. And we started messing with that industry. And from that, we created Slant 3D, which spun out a few years ago, which is focused on mass production of 3D printed parts, which has never really actually been achieved before. So it's been a fun challenge to work on there because making 3D printing really scalable, so it is a mass production option, has been something that's kind of out of reach, but also really kind of an ultimate goal for the industry.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that you brought that up in terms of you are focusing on mass production when it comes to 3D. But of course, in the last decade or so, the times that we hear about 3D printing, it relates a little bit more to kind of, some tchotchkes, creating little toys and little things on a personal machine. Now, mm-hmm. I know that for you personally, you're against personal 3D machines and kind of that realm. Can be a little controversial. Tell me why that is and why your focus is on that mass production side.
The industry has pushed really hard for personal machines because it seemed like the coolest thing that we could do was put one of these printers in everyone's home. What everybody didn't really realize is that as a machine that's reasonably complex in the context of home appliances, it just doesn't work in the home because it's going to break down or it's going to change or have something go wrong. And most people are not very handy. So I always use the analogy of a 3D printer is a bandsaw. It's not a microwave. It's something that hobbyists and makers can continue to have in their garages. And it's a fantastic tool, but it is not an appliance that everybody will put inside the house because just physically the machine will break down. And right now, the most complicated appliance that stays in your house is a dishwasher that has like half a motor in it. Mm-hmm. And then some people point to the car, but the cars are getting simpler and you drive them to the mechanic very often. So normal humans don't actually interact with their car other than the steering wheel. Exactly. So this idea of this complex manufacturing mini factory in your home and everyone's home just doesn't really work or play out very well. So we're more behind the idea of having 3D printing be part of the production and the fulfillment infrastructure, mm-hmm. to where you plug it into the side of an Amazon warehouse. And when you make an order on a website, a printer grows the part and then you throw it in a box and ship it to the person. So you get rid of all this waste of inventory and molding and shipping stuff across oceans, and instead just make it a full digital process where parts are made on demand.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Thank you for that description and I specifically was interested in that because, I'm sure like a lot of other people fantasize about the idea of having a little 3D printer in your house, and then whatever you need, it's going to be ready. So one of the things that you kind of explained is how it's done and the parts for it. So what am I missing, and what is like the rest of the general population missing who was interested in having it home? Because it was kind of, the idea is it's very easy to use. You just put in kind of the idea and it prints it for you, and you're good to go. And you're essentially solving the problem for a lot of other appliances in your home. So what's the problem with that thinking?
There's a couple today, and there's more long term. The couple today is, number one, it takes a lot of skill to actually operate a printer. There's not a database of parts that you can just print on demand and drop out. You can't take a picture of a doorknob and get a copy of that doorknob, which is as easy as it has to be for a real consumer device. You have to be an engineer, and you have to go into CAD and create the model and then pull it down from Thingiverse. And then you got to tweak it inside the slicer and hope it comes out good, and so on and so forth. So there's all these kind of edge cases where a simple consumer workflow where you can just, push a button and the thing appears, doesn't work for like 80% of the stuff that a person might try to print. So that's the first part, is that there's a big old skill gap over how to actually make a part to be printed. But more fundamentally, and the reason we're really not behind it, is the fact that the printers just aren't reliable long-term. A paper printer that just has one single sheet going through and only has to print one single layer breaks down on you often, and are designed to basically be thrown away after you do 2 or 3 reams of paper through it and don't want to buy ink anymore. A 3D printer is not able to be quite that affordable and breaks way faster. Because it has 3 separate motors moving in 3 separate directions that have hot plastic moving through it, or resin that smells, all these things that just cause problems that are not physically able to be gotten around because it's just the nature of the technology. When you're moving material around, something's going to wear out or break down. And that's not a good idea for a consumer appliance, where you really just want to have a touch screen with a single button right there and no moving parts that anybody can drop or move or push too hard or anything else. Whereas printers have tons of that kind of stuff. So it just creates a really bad product experience, which is why home printers certainly haven't taken off so far. And because of those physical constraints of them just breaking down, stops them from ever really being a good product into the future.
Right. That's a great explanation. And you're so right. I mean, even I haven't had a printer I haven't owned a printer for 15, 20 years, like I'm sure a lot of other people. And you're right. I mean, even the basic printers would break down almost every single time you try to print something. So that makes sense why kind of having them in our homes, maybe the appeal of it, you play around with it once, right? It'll kind of be gone. And you're right. There's also kind of the engineering aspect, because you actually do have to go into a platform and design what you want to use, which not everyone has that skill level just yet. So we're not at a level where that's going to be possible. You don't think that personal machines are the future, right? It's more mass production.
No, because again, the third thing about it too is that you're competing with Amazon one-day shipping. So you can either have a mini factory in your house that produce something in a few hours, or you can wait a few more hours and just get a real good final packaged product showing up on your doorstep the next day. So it just competitively isn't very good either.
Right. And what you mentioned earlier, which it sounds amazing. So you at Slant 3D would be more kind of working with people like Amazon and huge distributors and helping them create those products, which, I mean, from a consumer standpoint, that sounds amazing, right? You just have something printed, it goes in the box, it's shipped to you. So how does that process actually work? Where are you at right now with that? How is people's perception of having their parts, made 3D at the warehouse or whatever? Where are people's head at, and where are the companies in terms of their agreement? Are they for it? Are they still a little hesitant?
People are fine with it. 3D printed products, so long as they're well designed, are great, and can solve all kinds of problems that normally manufactured products just can't. So the consumers aren't the problem. There's almost unlimited demand for plastic stuff, as there has been for years, and how you make it is irrelevant to the end user so long as it's good. The companies themselves have the challenge of having this very big monolithic existing supply chain. They call up China, they make a mold, they make 100,000 of the action figure, they put them on a boat, the boat floats across the ocean over 3 months, and then you hope there's not a pandemic and it gets to you in a reasonable amount of time. And then they distribute them to the warehouses and ship them out.
Mhm.
And that whole system gets broken by 3D printing farms like ours, because instead of having that whole supply chain that comes from China on a boat on around, you just have this separate 3D printer factory or division of a warehouse, basically a section of the warehouse where the shelves make the product.
Mhm.
And then you just have raw materials sitting there. And when somebody clicks an order on Amazon or on some other e-commerce site, they sends a signal to one of the machine grows the part in about 24 hours. And then a normal warehouse worker pulls it off the machine, throws it in a box and ships it out. So rather than having huge inventories of hundreds of thousands of parts and this long, slow supply chain waiting for molded pieces to arrive and all the cost of warehousing and everything that goes with that, you simply has this super flexible, almost magic section of your fulfillment center that just cranks out parts all day long. Right now, the biggest demonstrator that we have of this is our mega farm in Idaho, which is spec'd out for 3,000 machines. We're producing tens of thousands of parts per week or so with it.
Wow.
And it operates that way in addition to regular mass production. The easiest way we found to get the companies transitioned over is to actually say, okay, you've got molds, you want 10,000 pieces. All right, we'll make you the 10,000 pieces and you don't have the cost of the mold. Okay. That's once we get them, we try to train them down to, okay, you don't need 10,000 pieces all at once. You're using 1,000 parts a month. We'll make 1,000 parts per month for you. That way they're like, okay, it's one step back and that's more efficient. I didn't have to buy 10,000 parts all at once. So cash flow is better. And then real long-term, we can ease them all the way down to, we'll just ship the parts to the guy that orders them and just be the fulfillment service in general. And you don't have to deal with distribution or anything else. So there's this gateway drug of, okay, we can do mass production 3D printing and you don't have the mold and you get to do it stateside. So it's faster. And then you can move down toward this increasingly flexible and more profitable type of supply chain where stuff is made almost on demand.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it. And it also comes from an environmental standpoint, right? Is we don't have to, what you mentioned is we could have another pandemic. I mean, not knock on wood, but when that happened, the world didn't expect it. And we do get most of our stuff over from China. So it alleviates that, cost of gas and transportation and things like that over here. So that sounds like a great solution, have it there and shipped out to the consumer, which sounds amazing. Now, tell me how Slant 3D started, how you started the company and where you are at right now in terms of that mass production and talking to companies.
So yeah, Slant 3D was spun out from Slant Concepts, the product design firm, about 3 years. Well, it's 4 years now. We're in 2023.
Barely.
Yes, exactly. But spun out a few years ago from that group of products that we had created to be 3D printed. And when we were working with that batch of, they were small robotics kits. When we were working with them, we saw that there was an engineering roadmap to make 3D printing scalable. It was not at that point. It was wildly irritating, and I didn't want to have anything to do with it personally. But when we built that first kind of prototype farm, we saw, okay, if we tweak this and push that and fix the supply chain for raw materials, then this can be affordable and should be more affordable than molding in many ways. So that kind of fundamental truth drove the company. And then as we were producing our own products so that we had actual cash flow, we started taking in clients for excess capacity that we had. It's like, oh yeah, we can print some parts for you and print some parts for you, to a point where the demand was high enough that we decided to spin out its separate organization. Since then, we keep on pushing on it. And again, we've got the main mega farm here in Idaho that is going to be the biggest print farm on the planet when it's all said and done. It's very automated. We got robots trundling up and down the aisles, moving parts and pieces around, and trying to increase that all the time. We have a second factory spec'd for the East Coast coming up here, should be this year. So it's growing very quickly. And our team is fantastic and almost doubling every single year. So we're well on the way, but there's hundreds of billions of dollars of plastic components that could be made with printing as it is today. There's no technological revolution that has to occur. With its operational capacity as it is today, there's a lot of plastic stuff that can be made. And COVID, we actually kind of have to thank, because it exposed the problems with these supply chains to where everybody was shopping, but has been shopping. It's tapering off a bit, but is looking for other options and some security in how they make stuff. So we can expect that to continue on. And as a new generation of folks kind of come up in engineering and product design, who are coming out of college, having worked with 3D printers, and are like, yeah, this should be able to work. We don't need to go get a mold. Then it gets a lot easier to convince folks to give it a shot. And there's a lot of industries that really should, especially in like retail, because like retail sections of the industry not only have the challenge of moving stuff around, but then they have the challenge of overproduction, because if you don't know how much is going to be sold, you make more than what you need. So retail in general wastes about 10 to 30% of the stuff made just because it never leaves the shelves. This is fashion and toys and anything else that you've ever seen on a shelf or on a website, because since it takes so long to get it from overseas, they have to have more than what they need, because the cost of having an empty shelf is greater than the cost of having a little too full of shelves. In the toy industry, that's a waste of about $2.5 billion a year. But if they moved over to 3D printing, they could produce waste just by buying all the printers and going for it. There's subtleties within that of like the actual implementation of it, but it's very doable. And there's an economic reason to do it blatantly bad, because injection molding requires this massive overconsumption, not overconsumption, just overproduction. It's not consumed at all. It's just ground up and then turned back into toys, or 90% of it ends up in a landfill. So 3D printing is a really good way just to make everything much more efficient and effective and better.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it. And this is exactly why I wanted to have you on the show, because I love all the aspects of it, and especially the environmentalism, which is really amazing. And I don't think that we realize enough how much plastic is, brought over from overseas to us, which is very, very costly. And congratulations on all your success, Gabe. I wish even more. But tell me some of the challenges that you personally have had as a CEO for this company, where, the technology is kind of new, but it's not the newest. Have you had any challenges? How are you personally kind of dealing with driving this mass production of 3D printing forward? Talking to people and to other companies, how has their reception been like, and how are you dealing with all of that personally?
The reception has been fine. I mean, whenever you start any sort of company, you're going to have about 99 no's to 1 yes. So you just got to get used to that, regardless of what you're doing. For me personally, as the company's continued to grow, starting a company is not something I recommend to anyone ever. It's a horrible job. It is exceptionally painful, especially if you want to continue pushing, because the company has an incredible amount of inertia to stay where it is. And there's a lot of incentive to always do that. It's like, okay, we're all paid. We're all doing fine. This is going to burn for a while. We got a good hot dog stand going. We are just going to live off this for the next 50 years. I'm a human. I'm lazy. I don't want to do anything more, because why would I? It's fine. For us, we have this much larger mission of really changing how the supply chain works, because it's just fantastically magical to have something created when you ask for it. And that's so cool that we keep on pushing on it. For me as an engineer, though, too, the technical challenges are just a lot of fun, because there's very few industries where there's this bottomless pit of stuff that needs to be created or optimized, while still having a kind of a very clear roadmap of where we need to go. We're not inventing fusion. We're just trying to optimize stuff. So there's no scientific breakthroughs that have to occur. It's just make this stuff work, which is much more manageable, but still a bastard all the time. You have to get used to the misery, because nothing ever works out correctly. There's no plan that's never screwed up, and there's no announcement that doesn't go wrong in some kind of a way. And there's no project that doesn't have some problems with it. So you learn to let water run off your back, and keep yourself centered within it, because you ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? After running this company, I am fairly employable. So if the whole thing catches fire tomorrow, I'm not too worried about myself, and my team is exceptional. So I'm not too worried about their prospects if the whole thing goes south. we're all here because it's just a really awesome thing to work on and has a really fundamental impact as we grow it and make it more significant, because it can dent the universe just a little bit there if we get all the molds killed off for certain industries and do a significant amount of production of stuff with grind job, because we know how to get there. It's just making sure that it happens, which you're just dealing with the world at that point, and the world is slow to change.
Well, thank you for that very realistic view of what it's like being a CEO. So it sounds like and because there is a huge trend now of kind of starting your own companies, getting that out of that 9-to-5 grind, which I'm all for, but I agree with you in terms of you're not the first CEO that I've heard say that it's a very, very difficult job. So what would you say? I mean, it sounds like being passionate about the business and actually making sure that it continues to grow would be one of the things that are important to, stay consistent in that business, right? So what else would there be? Being passionate about what you do, being obviously pretty strong-willed, and being able to take rejection. But if anybody is willing to, become a CEO and take that leap and start a company, what other advice would you give them?
So one of the little ideas or trite little quotes that I've come across in talking to everybody else about this kind of thing is that if you do something for 2 years, you'll break even. If you do something for 5 years, you'll make a living. If you do something for 10 years, you'll be rich. Mainly because most humans can't do anything for 2 years. Mm-hmm. We get bored too easy. I think it's more about your resiliency and able to just grind through it all the way through, because ultimately you're competing with other humans. So even if you have a competitor who's ahead of you at some point, if they're better than you, then you're just waiting for them to screw up, and you have to screw up less than they do. And that just happens over time because humans will continuously screw up. So the best advice I can give to anybody is just make sure that you're committed for a very long-term relationship with this organization. And if you're not, there's plenty of ways to get in, get out, make money quick, and move on with life. If that's the goal, go ahead and do it. But if you're wanting to build an organization or trying to build anything with any sort of real impact, you had better accept the fact that it will be many years before you get to see what it is. Mm-hmm. But since so few people do it, that's an immediate competitive advantage over everybody else. Mm-hmm. It applies for everything from YouTube channels to companies to writing a good book. You have to commit for a very long time. You have to take a ton of flack, and you need to know how to move forward after each screw up, because it's fine to screw up once. That's learning. But if you screw up twice, that's just stupidity. So make sure that you're getting better and screwing up as quickly as you can, so that you're learning faster than some other guy, so that you can hopefully get an edge on him. And then when the tough times come, you can just survive for longer than somebody else. Mm-hmm. That's my 2 cents on the whole thing. Okay.
And I love that. And that is so true. I think with social media, especially, we want that quick dopamine hit, right? It's just, we want everything, we want it now. And that's the biggest lesson, is we have to be consistent in something and watch it grow. And if you really wanted to watch it grow, you will be there making sure that, nurturing it. So that's amazing advice. Thank you. So what's next for Slant 3D? Where are you guys at now? You have the second location on the East Coast kind of starting to flourish. So what's next? What's coming up? What can
second location still has to be built. It's
okay.
Planning on getting it in here kind of a Q1 or so to really start the build out and implementation. But yeah, there's that. We plan to open a couple more factories inside of the States to basically cover the 5 shipping zones of the area. And then we'll do a couple of international ones but in less than 3 years here. All of that will happen in the next 3 years. In addition to that, we're just trying to make it as easy as possible to use these systems, because right now it's a lot of effort to use 3D printing, mainly because the industry is led by engineers who overcomplicate everything. Most people just want a part. They don't care what the resolution is or what the material is. They want a part that's good or strong or whatever else it was. So we're really working hard on the software side to make it just as simple as possible to access all this production capacity we have in the factory. So again, early this year, we'll be releasing a line of software where someone can basically just plug our farm into their website, either maybe an Etsy store or Shopify or an internal supply website for people to buy spare parts from inside of a warehouse. And that will make it basically one click to get a part that didn't exist the day before. And ensures that you're able to do it quickly, because if you're running an e-commerce store and you sell 100 orders in a day or something, and you're like, oh, we've got a lot of 3D printers, we can't produce parts that fast. You've got the worst website in the world because you're never fulfilling when the spikes are around. So we're at a scale now to where we can support fidget spinners going viral again or something like that, so that when everybody hops on that wagon, we can support it and actually deliver goods on time and everybody can make some money off of it. So the fact that this manufacturing backend is being implemented and easy enough to access to where anybody who wants to pursue 3D printing can just plug into us and doesn't have to deal with all the infrastructure and the machinery and the operations. They can just create awesome products. Is kind of the next step of just making that as easy as possible for other people to create really awesome products and sell them to folks.
I love that. I'm so excited for you. That genuinely sounds so cool. Now, where can people find Slant 3D, where they can find you? Drop a handle, drop the websites, which I will also include in the description, but tell the listeners where they can find you.
Well, the website is slant3d.com. If you want to talk to me, I'm more of a LinkedIn user than anything, so you can just Google my name over there. And then we always talk about all this stuff over on the YouTube channel, which is the Slant 3D YouTube channel. We post a couple times a week over there talking about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I love that because you're very big on education, just like I am. So, and I love that channel educates people on kind of all the ins and outs and lets them know about the amazing future that Slant 3D has. But Gabe, thank you so much. You have been absolutely incredible. Thank you for being a guest on the T with B.
No problem. Thank you, B, for having me.